All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar session. It is the second session of our DevOps Transformation webinar series. It is Service Management in a DevOps Environment. My name is Alexander Mazurek with Quint, Wellington, Redwood, and I'll be your host during your session today. Now, just a few things about our organization, Quint, Wellington, Redwood. We're a 100% independent management consulting firm. We've been in business now for almost 25 years. Our anniversary is next year. We started in 1992 over in Amsterdam, but today we've expanded to be a completely global company. We have over 250 consultants who are operating in 49 countries on just about every single continent. Our core business practices include sourcing, architecture, governance, lean IT, ITSM, and DevOps, of course. And we're very proud to say that we've been listed as a top global advisor on sourcing and governance by the IAOP for the last 3 years running. We received the highest possible ratings in the areas of client satisfaction, delivery of excellence, and innovative programs. And last off, we continue to be a trendsetter in the areas of ITSM, lean IT, and DevOps. Now, as I mentioned, this is the second session of our DevOps Transformation webinar series. Last week, we covered the impact of DevOps on operations. That recording is up online right now on our Vimeo channel. And also, as a follow-up to this webinar as well, we will include the links to all the recordings up to this point as well. And next week, starting on Tuesday, we'll be covering DevOps is more than buying a tool. And next Thursday will be the business case for DevOps. So next week, we'll be wrapping up our series with the final two sessions. And please feel free to register for those if you have not already. And now I just want to introduce our speakers today. Our speakers today are Alex Van Kampen and Frederick Schucken. Niels Loader there at the top was featured on our first webinar, and he'll be featured again in the sessions next week. We're using two of these guys at a time right now to do a back and forth on the topics at hand. And without any further ado, I am going to hand things over today to our presenters, Alex Van Kampen and Frederick Schucken. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, other Alex, I should say. So welcome everybody who joined. Today, myself, Alex, and Frederick will be talking about service management in the DevOps environment. So the way that we want to do that is by having sort of a back and forth. We are going to be talking along the lines of a couple of topics. The first one being what about IT service management and ITIL and how that relates to DevOps. Then we're going to be talking a little bit about service strategy and service definition. Then we're going to follow that up by talking about how we deal with sort of the core processes of ITIL. So we talk about incident management and problems and changes. Then last but not least, we want to talk about the ownership and responsibility of a DevOps team. Then we want to tie that all together, have a short wrap up, and then open the line for questions that you can, again, as Alex said, put in the QA panel at the bottom. So what we'd like to start with is talk about IT service management and ITIL. So this is a question, Frederick, I'm going to ask you. So why care about IT service management when doing DevOps? Is all that stuff still relevant?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and excellent to be in this webinar. One of my favorite topics when doing customer projects involving DevOps are always the discussions we meet when we meet the IT service management people. And to me, let's just give it away. I think IT service management is incredibly relevant in a DevOps environment. And if you look at IT service management, basically, I mean, people either they think of frameworks like ITIL or COBIT or ISO 20000, but basically IT service management is about all the activities in an enterprise, you know, they need to be performed to deliver great IT services to the business. So it's about plan, design, deliver, operate, control IT services, and it's also about continuous improvement. And these topics, of course, will not go away when you're doing DevOps. So IT service management and those activities is very much still very relevant.
Okay, but let me ask you, because there's a lot of people, especially in an enterprise setting, that would say, well, how does ITIL fit in here? Because isn't that the stuff that slows us down? Aren't those the processes that hurt us when we try to deliver value?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at IT service management and the way it is being used in practice in real life, then all those activities that we need to perform, the way they are controlled and steered is by making policies and activities are structured in long processes and supporting procedures. And the problem is that if you have a siloed organization with functional silos and people within different silos all need to work together to deliver that IT services, well, then you've got all these problems with queuing, waiting time, handovers, it's error prone, and then you've got these long processes and these long delays, and basically I think people are fed up with that kind of stuff, and they blame it, sort of, on IT service management. That's the reason people think IT service management, please, let's get rid of it and let's do Agile and DevOps.
Okay, but you're basically saying so there is space, or there is actually a need to sort of codify those business processes even when you work towards a DevOps organization, but make sure that those processes are not the long and difficult ones with all the many handovers. Is that what I'm hearing, or that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go the way of DevOps and you're going to use those DevOps principles in your organization, then you get rid of those functional silos. You get basically you switch from processes being the glue that holds the whole organization together, and you move towards these great cross-functional autonomous teams, and that will have a major impact on how you do the activities within the processes, and that will have a major impact on the way IT service management will look like in your organization. But in the core, it is still relevant.
Okay.
And basically, when you talk about service management, it's not just about the stuff we all know, like incidents and problems and stuff like that. But if you, for example, take, well, I think the most used framework within the world of ITIL, then we're talking about different stuff. We're talking about service strategy and service design, service transition, and of course, service operation and continuous service improvement. And I think that, Alex, will bring us to our next topic. What about the focus on things like service strategy and service design? And it's a very question we often meet within our projects at our customers. What will be the impact of DevOps on these topics within service management?
Okay, so I would love to elaborate a little bit on that, because we do get asked the question a lot. So when we talk about service design and service strategy, it is, first I'm going to start with, it is more important than it has ever been, especially when you talk about identifying teams and identifying a purpose for these teams to work towards. So, and I don't want to be too negative about what's out there today, but traditionally, in my view, organizations have either not been very good in designing and defining their IT services altogether, or they have been good, extremely good at defining them in a way that nobody ever reads them. So, and some organizations don't do it at all, and the other ones, they might go to a level of detail that you end up with a 200-page Word document that nobody, and especially your business partner, is not going to read. Each team might have a different standard, so inter-team communication is not going to be helped by that. So
basically what you're saying is that either way, it's basically either useless because it's not being done, or it's being done incredibly well but still being useless, right?
Yeah, so I would say it's not being done well, or it's not being done effectively. So what I would like to look for, and this is why I put the word purpose on the slide. So in any organization, or in any part of the organization, what you need to understand is, how do I deliver value to my customer? So basically, what does my value stream look like? Now, when an organization understands that value stream, and if they understand how the individual teams can contribute to delivering value in that value stream, then we get to talk about purpose, and then we get to talk about what the role of a team is in a value stream. Now, that purpose and that position in a value stream, and that position related to other teams, That to me is what is key in talking about a service definition of a team, and that is why it is key for a DevOps team to define that. Not in a 200-page document, but maybe in a very short a purpose brief or service brief or whatever you want to call that, but something that makes a team understand why it's there and what each individual in that team can contribute to delivering that value, but also in understanding, okay, so what is our position in that value stream and how can we work together with these other teams and how can we consume the value being delivered by another team as a service and how can we contribute to that as well. So for me, the service definition and the service strategy would really be about capturing the purpose of that DevOps team. So if that makes sense to you, Frederick, so at least that's my little rant about why it's still very important and even more so today.
Yeah, the funny thing is that basically what you're talking about should be it should be the starting point when thinking about how to restructure your organization, and whether or not you're really restructuring in a hierarchy, that's not really relevant, but the way people work together. So I was talking about a siloed organization with functional silos, people working on development or on making great business specifications or doing the operations or the security work. And what you're talking about is to change all that and look at the value streams from a customer perspective. And basically what you want in those value streams is achieve flow. And basically if you want to have flow, then you don't want to have queuing and you don't want to have waiting times and stuff like that. So that's a whole different perspective on the organization if you go down this road of thinking and looking at your organization, right?
No, exactly, and you know, we see a lot of organizations that are very siloed, and some of them, in my view, are not even matrix organizations anymore. They're sort of a three-dimensional matrix with all these resource pools, because we think if we put 100 engineers under the same hierarchical umbrella that they will probably learn something and will have sort of these benefits from the scale that they're operating on, and we know that that doesn't work. But even in a siloed organization, we need to think about who is our customer, how can we, what do they value, what do they perceive as value from the products that we deliver. So what is our value stream? So that would be, that thinking to me is crucial if you want to have an effective IT function, and it's a prerequisite for moving to DevOps and instilling that sense of purpose in a team.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the service strategy, the kind of work that's being done right now, will change if you move to this perspective on the organization. And the funny thing is that the service definition and all that comes with it is also very important, because those value streams should be autonomous. And you want an autonomous value stream that if you want to change something or get work done, you don't need all the other people working in all the other different value streams. So basically the way you deal with your service definition, I'm not even talking about the whole agile way of working, being iterative and things like that, but the autonomy that you need to work like this is also something that is really important within your service definition. And it ties into your organizational structure, the way you deal with flow efficiency, the way you deal with your resources, your architecture, technical architecture, and all these kinds of things.
Exactly. But that coincidentally, Frederick, ties into I think the next thing or topic that we want to address, because if we talk about autonomous teams and if we talk about these teams that can make their own decisions because they understand their position in the value stream. So what will happen to these enterprise processes that we know today, like incident management, problem management, change management? So basically all of those units of work that still exist, will they still exist in the DevOps environment?
Oh, definitely. I mean, whether or not you do DevOps, you'll probably run into problems. You will do many changes, maybe 100 a day, who knows, but you will still get problems. You will have incidents and, of course, service requests. These will not go away. But when you go down the DevOps route, things will change. And I've been working in the last decade in many IT organizations, and a pretty large one at that. And basically, we've got a service desk, we've got an incident manager, we've got teams in a second or third line trying to resolve incidents. We've got people focused on problem management and huge administrations where we have all the problems documented and connected to the incidents. And then we've got people trying to fix it. And when they find a solution, they need to put forward an RFC, a request for change. And then hopefully within a couple of weeks, we've got a change done in production. And then we can see whether or not the problem is being solved. That basically 10 years ago was my world. I was working in that. And what I see today, and I've been working at this airline company recently, and we've got this DevOps team, and it's got a very clear picture on the service they're providing for their business in a certain application. And what the team did is they put a release into production on a Friday morning, let's say 8 or 9 o'clock. And a couple of hours later, they received information they were having problems, their customers, and the team needed to solve it. But they didn't really understand what the problem was. So basically what they did, they made another release, including additional logging within the application. And they put that release into production. They made sure that in the next hour they got all the logging information. They used it to really analyze the problem. They found the things that were wrong, built a third release, put that into production, problem solved, no incidents.
Yeah, and I think that just illustrates the whole thinking of wanting to move forward, not rolling back to previous versions, and but especially because, was it because they did it on a Friday morning that they got the feedback right away, or?
No, basically they got their feedback from their business colleagues. I mean, the release went in production just fine. All the automated testing stuff they done, all green on the board, no problems there. But somewhere in the business outcome, things were going wrong. And the funny thing is, the whole incident, change, problem, procedures, processes, they're sort of all tied into one thing. So basically what the team learned from that and the organization is, if you work in such a DevOps team, autonomous, cross-functional, you do not need long process descriptions and procedures. You just need to have a clear focus on the goal of the process, and that's good enough. I mean, this is a team with about 50 people working on my example. They're all sitting in the same office, basically at the same table. You don't need procedures in that. So you really get a flow going with those units of work associated with IT services and IT service management. And the increase of speed also will enhance the quality of your IT services. And it's way cheaper to support it like that than in the old traditional way that hopefully everybody starts to hate.
Yeah, and that is something that I absolutely believe in, so if you make the process faster, and this is discussions that I've had many times, even at organizations that might have products that they don't share with, or they don't interact with customers that often, they might say, we don't need to deliver any new feature really quick, so we don't need the speed. But you're delivering the speed and you're speeding up the process not for the sake of throwing out new functionality left and right. You're doing that for the sake of the quality. So once it is economically viable to push a one-line code change into production, because it only takes you a couple of minutes, then you really can start delivering quality. If it takes you 3 months to push anything out to delivery because you have to pass 5 different change approval boards, you're going to make these changes way too big, you're going to make them way too complex, and quality in general is going to suffer. And so for me, that is a great example of that airline company you were at. And one of the things, I think, an example that was given last year at the DevOps Enterprise Conference, and anybody that listened to the previous webinar, I will be referencing Mr. Jez Humble throughout. But one of the great things he did at that webinar at that conference, was he asked a 1,200 people crowd, who does deployments over the weekend? And like 80% put their hand up, raise their hand, and said, yes, I do. Well, then you're doing it wrong. Because then probably you are still afraid to break something when you push it to production. Now, that doesn't mean you should shoot everything in there right away, but you're probably still afraid of that process. And that to me says something. So But one of the things I think, Frederick, and I'm going to quickly move on to the next topic,
Yep.
is what we try to deal with is when we say, okay, we talk about a autonomous team, and we talk about teams identifying issue resolution and then pushing that resolution or update into production, is that sort of the balance between ownership and responsibility. So on the one hand, we want the team to own the end-to-end solution that they're working towards, which can be part of an application, which can be a set of applications, but we want that team to be owner of the end-to-end solution. But then we also want to make them responsible for that life cycle, because if we say you own the solution, but we're going to cut you off halfway and we're going to make you wait for the cab, we're going to make you wait for any deployment capability within the organization, then that flow is not going to be there. So one of the things that we like to consider is, if you think of a team as that end-to-end responsible party, you need to make sure that the technology is there, one, to actually push all the things forward, and you need to make sure that your stakeholders are aligned to do that. So when we talk about technology being ready for that, we're not going to say buy all the fancy DevOps tools, but we are going to say you want to limit the degrees of freedom that an individual or a team has when they move items across these different areas. So if you have a team that is available or ready and able to define a piece of code, commit that code to whatever version control system they have, and from there a build is generated, and from that build a new artifact is created and stored, and that artifact can be deployed onto whatever environment in a standardized and automated way without people manually interrupting that process, then you're going to be able to allow a team to do a lot more than you previously thought, because what you're doing is you're allowing the team to control it, but you're actually limiting their degrees of freedom to introduce failure into their process. Now, a second thing about that, and that's a question that then immediately pops up, but if I allow a team to push anything to production, how about segregation of duties? How would my compliance party or my risk officer feel about my team pushing stuff forwards to production? Now, first off, it is very possible, even in larger, more traditional financial institutions, to have teams do this. But as said, you need to make sure that you limit those degrees of freedom. You need to understand how any change flows through that life cycle, not by a process or by a cab with 100 people who ask you questions, but by automating those parts of the process. And when you automate that, incidentally, you get the best audit trails and the best, most rich, valuable information on who did what at what time. And of course, you can introduce a lot of controls to make sure that one individual within a team cannot push one change from dev to test to QA to production. You can introduce those limitations as long as you keep that within the team. So, and I'm sorry, Freddie, this is sort of like, this is my spiel, so I get really excited, so I talk for a very long time. But
knowing you, I'm not surprised, because this is really a very important topic, the whole compliance issue tied into the ownership and responsibility. And one thing I will say, and thanks for explaining it to us so clearly, that, well, let me say it like this. One of the best definitions somebody ever gave me about DevOps is, yeah, DevOps, it's basically making everything into a standard change. Low risks, easy to do, repeatable, and with a very good audit trail. So all the information, everybody from a compliance or security or whatever viewpoint ever would want to have, is basically there at the push of a button. And that's a great ability to develop and to have in your organization.
Exactly. So start making sure that everything is under version control, but also, and this ties into what we said before when we talk about the role of a team in the value stream, make sure that the product out of that team, or even the technical product, is consumable as a service by the other parties, whatever that might be.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And something that we get asked, we actually got asked at the last webinar is, but don't you need to be on the cloud to do all this? And we said no, but we do think that moving towards any capability where you have, at the push of a button, your platforms available in a way that actually means something, so environments that are actually alike or identical. We really think that is key to do this in the most effective way. Now you can do that, or you can invest in building that capability within your own organization, or you consume it from organizations that have that ability available for you today. So that was that. So I'm looking at the time, and I'm afraid that if we don't get to questions or wrap up, we might run a little over. So why don't we go to the next one and talk about a little bit of the key takeaways. So Frederick, what would your message be to the audience when we talk about service management in a DevOps organization?
Well, basically two things, Alex. I think for one, service management, I know a lot of organizations who invested heavily in IT service management knowledge, and they often ask me, is that investment still relevant? And basically I would say it is even more so. I mean, what you said about service strategy, service design, the way you need to rethink the processes and especially the goal of the processes and make sure that knowledge is shared within your organization is one of the key enablers of success with doing DevOps. So basically that's one. The other one is, if somebody's going to tell you that he or she has a way to do it faster, cheaper, and better, whatever that is he or she is trying to sell you, you probably won't believe it. And yet, the promise of DevOps is just that. Yes, if you go the DevOps way, and it might not be easy, but in the end, you will be faster, you will be... And who doesn't want that? That would be my key takeaway.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty good, and something that I would want to add to that, or at least my key takeaway would be, if we talk about service definition, or if we talk about DevOps teams, it's really, for me, it's about understanding what the overall value stream is, what the position of that team is within that value stream, how they contribute, what their purpose basically is, and from that, how they can deliver to that purpose or promise as a service to either other parties within the organization or towards the customer. And to do that successfully, or to do that effectively, we want to allow the team to be autonomous, so we want to give them a pretty big responsibility, which we can do as long as we limit certain degrees of freedom, and we make sure that we have the evidence and just the mechanics in place to do that in a way that our risk officers won't attack us, or our compliance officers won't get upset. So that's, I think, really what we wanted to share. And so I think we're going to ask other Alex, did we get any questions so far?
Yes, we do have one asked during the presentation, and I just want to remind everybody, if you have any other ones, this is an open forum, so please continue to ask them. The first question I have here for you, Alex, is we've tried to implement ITIL a few times without much success. DevOps seems to be a little bit more attractive, but why should we not neglect ITIL?
Well, that's a very fair statement, and I think so. First off, thank you for that question. So I think it really relates to also, especially what Frederick was talking about. So we should definitely not ignore ITIL, but we should be really aware of what is the purpose of what we're trying to do. So when we talk about change management, for example, we talk about making sure that we act in a predictable way with high quality changes that go into our environments, and we have an understanding of what they are. Now, what tends to happen in traditional organization when implementing these processes, we think, okay, if it went wrong at one point in time, I'm going to make sure that we have a panel of judges to identify if you've done all the right things. And this sort of grows into a very process-heavy, or even, and I forget who that was who coined that analogy, but what tends to happen with ITIL, it tends to become sort of a scar tissue in the organization. So you can identify everything that went wrong in the past in the organization by looking at the way the processes were set up, as opposed to taking the IT infrastructure library and saying, okay, this is a reference for us. This is what we want to get out of it. How do we make sure that we enable teams to get there effectively, as opposed to, okay, this is what the process tells us. How can we make a panel of judges enforce those processes? Because then you're not going to really get much out of it, apart from it's going to slow you down and it's going to demotivate a lot of people. So I would say definitely do not ignore it, but make sure you understand what it is that you're trying to achieve and what elements of ITIL you can instill within those teams, and not introducing additional handovers or judges. That makes sense. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, no, I think that was good, Alex. The next question we have here is, in my company, we have a monolithic architecture. So if we think we're going to implement DevOps here, we have to do so in a specific possible scope. So in this case, should we have two different ITSM processes for two different scenarios? Okay, it was a little bit clarified here, saying implementing DevOps for new services using the principles required to. You may want to look at the question that came in there, Alex, and read it for yourself.
Okay, I'm not sure I have that QA panel. I'm sorry, Frederick.
Yeah, well, the question is very recognizable. I mean, exactly. We've got an IT organization, and we've got this big monolithic application that we're all working on. And then basically what many organizations do is they take a little chunk out of that monolithic application and build something new that is more standalone, loosely coupled with the monolithic application. And organizations try to do that in a DevOps way of working. And then basically you've got this two-speed issue within your organization. And it would be foolish to say, well, we've got these procedures for, let's say, change management, and we need to do all these procedures also for this new team that's working in this DevOps way. That would be foolish. The goal of both processes might be the same, but of course you want different, new, faster, flow-enabled procedures, if you need procedures at all, for this new entity within your organization. And then basically this is what is called bimodal IT. And bimodal IT is not an end state. You don't want bimodal IT. You want to move as quickly to this new way of working. But as long as you're not there yet, yes, then you have this two-speed issue within your organization. And yes, you can basically set up different processes for both situations. That's no problem. So I would definitely advise to do that.
Yeah, and I think if I can add to that, and yes, bimodal IT, and I fully agree with you, Frederick. You don't want that as an end state. So I always refer to it as sort of bipolar IT, because I don't think as an end state it's very effective for an organization. But when you're talking about breaking down monolithic applications for DevOps, I think, and this is a free tip, if you're out there on SlideShare or wherever, look up presentations by a fella called Adrian Cocroft, who was the one of the cloud architects for Netflix, and he has great stories about breaking up these monolithic organizational structures and also application landscapes, and moving more towards microservices, where you take out functionality and make sure you run the life cycle of that functionality as a service. So Alex, do we have any more questions that we want to go into, because we're running out of time? So
yeah, absolutely. No. That was very good. We have a couple thank yous coming in, but that looks like to be it. So we'll go ahead and wrap up today. Just want to thank everybody again, and thank Alex and Frederick for the great presentation. Remember, this is only the second of our 4 sessions, so please make sure to tune in next time. Next Tuesday at the same time, 11 o'clock Eastern time here in the United States, we are doing DevOps is more than buying a tool. If you're in this session right now, you'll be receiving a thank you email with the recording to this, as well as the registration link. So please feel free to register for those if you have not already. And we hope you had a nice session here today. Just want to cover the few methods that we have to contact us that are out there. We're active on just about every single social media network, so please feel free to follow on there to get access to our latest releases of white papers, blog posts, other material, as well as announcements for webinars and other events that we hold as well. And the last thing I'd like to touch upon is that a few of us will be attending the DevOps Enterprise Conference next month in San Francisco. If DevOps is on the list for your organization, this is a great conference to go to. We were there last year, had a great time. All the experts are there: Gene Kim, Jez Humble, like Alex mentioned before, and it's really where all the heads sort of get together, and it's really the latest and greatest there. But if you are going to be there, we'd love to meet you, and feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to meet us there as well. That's really it for us today, guys. Thank you again for joining. Make sure to tune in next week and enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend as well. Thank you.